The drink, the gig, the girls.
The lyrics are always about fighting, drinking, dying, living. You know, the things that everybody does.
So today we're talking about CROCK of Gold, a few rounds with Shane MacGowan. I'm having a hard time to call it a documentary. What is it?
It's pure cinema, darling, you know, no holds barred. I don't see the difference really between a fictional film and a what they call a documentary. In fact, I like fiction films that seem very real, and I like documentaries that play with what is the truth, how do you judge where the truth begins or ends, you know. And I like mixing dramatic elements with realism. I like animating things when you don't have a way of telling the story and you can just draw it. So I hope it crosses lots of boundaries and doesn't stay just in documentary. I think the exciting thing about what they call documentary as opposed to fiction, which I love too, is that you find the film as you make it. You don't know before what you're trying to do, really, which is exciting. Get lost and find your way out of the woods.
Oh, that's interesting, because I was about to ask you if you already knew in the beginning what you wanted, or if the journey was actually...
Well, I knew I wanted to celebrate Shane, but show the bad side of the guy as well as the good side. You know, I wanted to show everything. I actually thought it would be great if at the end it's like a miracle. He gets up out of the wheelchair and walks off into the sunset, but that didn't happen.
No, it didn't. But you have quite a unique technique that you use in your films. As you mentioned, you have these animation parts, you use fictional parts, you use real parts that you even... While I was watching the film, I wasn't sure, wait a second, was that original footage or is it something that you actually filmed?
Yeah, I like confusing people. You know, I think you play a game with the audience, hopefully, where you challenge them, you provoke them, you know, they're not quite sure. As long as you don't lose them, I think you should play as many games as possible, because that's, to me, what cinema is, you know. And it comes from being a punk, really. A long time ago, I was lucky to be around in the punk time, and I had a camera. No one else had a camera, because I was at film school, and I had a key secretly made to the camera room, so I could go at night and get the camera and go to the gig, try and film the band. Because the manager, Malcolm McLaren, was on the door stopping anyone coming in with any filming. So you have to take the camera apart, put the lens under this shoulder and a magazine here, and go to the toilets, put it back together, and then sneak around. And so it was very guerrilla style, you know, really bad handheld, you know. And then Malcolm realized he had a cheap film crew, because he had a free camera. He had me for free. So I started filming them, and then we made a film called The Great Rock and Roll Swindle, where some days we'd have a lot of money, it seemed. Like I could have a 35mm camera. Next day there's no money, so I Super 8, I've got the Super 8. I had friends at my film school who were studying animation, so I could make cartoons with them. And in a way, punk fashion was taking things that didn't belong, old things, safety pin this with this, and put it together. So taking different formats, some video, some film, some animation, banging it all together, mash-up, they call it now. But it felt like a punk aesthetic, you know. So I still hope I'm a punk filmmaker in a way, you know. Although I was never a normal punk. I was a bit of an intellectual, you know.
Oh, so you say that punks weren't intellectual?
Well, they were self-taught. I was different. I was taught by other people. Punks taught themselves, which was amazing.
Can you recall how you felt back then when you started making those tiny films, documentaries? Because obviously you were passionate about it, because otherwise you wouldn't have sneaked in and tried to film. I was,
you know, it was a very exciting thing to be involved with the Sex Pistols, because instantly they became a national, notorious, like most wanted, half criminal, half pop star type, famous gangsters. Or it was very exciting because people were very scared of them or completely in love with them, hated them or adored them. And, you know, everywhere you went, you had free food, free drinks, if you were part of the circle. So it was like, I don't know, it was funny to be involved in. And I met them by chance, you know, because in London, we had the docks were the main reason for London. All the ships would come from all over the world. A big area of London was the dock. A lot of activity and lively heart of London, really. And then in the late 60s, early 70s, they closed. So it was a beautiful place to just walk around, and on a Sunday afternoon, you had newspapers in the wind and like rusting ships and cranes and grass growing in the cobblestones. Very strange. But one day in 75, I heard this song on the wind. You know, I followed the song. It's a bit like Alice in Wonderland. And there's a warehouse, and the doors open, and the sound is coming. So I go up the stairs, and it's getting louder and louder. And I realized they're just destroying this song. It's like, what's going on here? They're saying, I want you to know that I hate you, baby, rather than love you. And they're playing really raw rock and roll. And I come in the stairwell, and it, you know, opens straight into the floor. So you're looking like a worm's eye view of them silhouetted against these big windows. But they look like nothing you'd seen before. They look like insect men from outer space or something, because everyone then had long hair and flared trousers. These guys had really spindly legs and spiky hair, and they had these big jumpers, pullovers, stripy red and black or yellow and black. They looked like bees or wasps, and they were destroying this. And they hadn't played a gig. I just stumbled across them. I was at film school, so I asked them if they'd do some music for a student film I'm making. And I shouldn't swear, but they said, fuck off, you know. And I was like, wow, you know. And they said they wouldn't do that, but they were going to play a concert, their first gig, in a month. So they told me that. And I was so excited. I thought I'd seen the future. And I went back to all the people where I lived, all my friends, saying, I've seen the future. I've seen the future. This band are amazing. And they said, what are they called? Oh, shit, I didn't ask their name. So I didn't see the gig. I spent a long time looking in the music papers. Some band, must be a band with a weird name. And then finally I saw this Sex Pistol. Must be them, you know. So I went to the second gig. So I was really lucky to get in there early.
That sounds like a movie itself.
Yeah, maybe I'm making it up, but no, it's the way I remember it. No, it happened like that.
When you started describing, I was like, wait a second, is he making fun of me?
Well, I'm trying to tell it in a way that it's unbelievable, but it was true.
That's crazy. It's awesome, because actually that was the beginning of your career, right? Yeah.
By chance. I mean, I was at film school, but I left then. I just stole the camera, borrowed the camera, and filmed the Sex Pistols, and then I made the movie, The Rock and Roll Swindle, about them, and went back to the film school, and they graduated me on this movie that was in all the cinemas around England. You know, it's very bizarre.
That's really interesting, because a lot of students feel like they have to stay in school and finish their studies.
Right.
But it seems like it's legit to step out, make your experiences, and maybe go back to finally finish everything.
Well, I showed them the film in the end, yeah. Yeah, but with that punk thing happening, it was far more exciting to be actually filming that, even though I didn't know what I was doing. You know, I didn't know how to work a camera. So, but then I got other cameramen, you know, from students come with me and be the crew, and two of them went on to get Oscar nominations as cameramen. You know, it was bizarre.
Would you say it's a lot of luck or maybe talent in the beginning?
I think it's a lot of luck, but you need to recognize luck, and not everyone recognizes it.
Right.
I don't know. It's probably a bit of both.
You have quite a unique technique. You're using stylistic devices that are like typically Julien Temple style, I would say. How would you describe your way of filming?
Well, I'm interested in different dramatic, I like different approaches to telling stories, different playwrights, different writers. I like bringing the audience inside the film with you, rather than keeping them always outside. I like to make them laugh a lot. I like to believe that I really don't know very much about making films. When I make a new film, it's better for me to think I don't know anything really and get really scared by the prospect of failing. Because then I think you find new ways of telling stories, which is really the most exciting thing about working in films, is to find new ways of doing things if you can. So those are things. I like provoking people to think. I like pissing off quite a lot of people, and as long as enough people like it, I'm very happy with that. I don't like the idea of making everyone like it.
It's a lot of footage, and I was wondering, how long did it take to collect everything you used in the film?
I've had worse times. I did a film about London, and there's so much film of London through the years, which was very difficult watching it all. You have to go very fast, and you have to train yourself to like slam on the brakes. If you see something, maybe that's going to be good. Stop, go back, look, good, it's good. But on this one, there was a lot of footage about Ireland and England and stuff that we were looking at. But I love that part of it because it's, it's like a detective work. You have to find the clues amongst all the false trails, and it's very exciting, that part of it. I'm starting a project about Los Angeles, again about the psyche of LA, the soul of Los Angeles through the music. And I'm starting that process again of just watching as much footage of the city through the time, which I enjoy a lot. I did study history, so I have a kind of feeling for history, really.
You're always saying we made. So you had a lot of help.
Yeah, filmmaking is a communal artwork.
Especially Johnny Depp helped you?
Well, he helped me, helped me get through it. Because Shane is difficult, there's no denying that. And it was good to have an ally like Johnny, who's a good friend of Shane's, but I knew him. He used to babysit my daughter in LA before he was huge. So I've known him a long time, and he made sure the film didn't capsize like a boat sinking. A few times it looked like it could.
Who came up with the idea?
Well, bizarrely, I knew Shane in the punk time, but I wasn't in contact with him. But my cameraman said, I know this guy and he's friends with Shane, and Shane is asking whether you'd be interested in doing a film. So it came from Shane.
Oh, really? But it feels like, as you say, he's difficult. And I've heard in another interview that you gave that he wasn't always up for working or cooperating.
Well, it was a bit like, do you know David Attenborough films about animal, natural world? It's a bit like trying to film the snow leopard. You set up these cameras and you just wait and see if the snow leopard one night will run through and you get a moment on film. It's a bit like that with Shane. He's not really, having asked me to do the film, he did say, I'm not doing any fucking interviews, Go away and make the film. I said, can't we do it together? No, it's your film, not me.
But it seems like, you use a lot of interviews from back then, and then there's this interview his wife did.
Yeah, that's right. Well, when he didn't want to do any interviews, I did start desperately calling journalists who may have spoken with Shane in 5 a.m. in a bar in Berlin in 1985. Do you have the tape? Do you still have anything? And surprisingly, a lot of people kept these very bad quality tapes that you couldn't really use, in a film. But they were so great because it was Shane in the moment rather than him in the wheelchair looking back, which isn't very real or exciting. So we had that kind of plan, and then I thought, how else can we get him to speak? And what about talking to Johnny, Shane? And so I give Johnny a load of ask him about this, ask him about that, smuggle it in because it's not an interview, Shane. It's just a conversation. I'm trying to tell Johnny to. And first night, Shane didn't turn up. Second night, Johnny didn't turn up. Third night, they turn up and start drinking, start talking. And I'm like, when Johnny going to ask him something useful about Shane, because they're just talking
and
about anything,
drunk.
nothing about nothing about what I can use, So they were talking for 8 hours. I got about 5 minutes of stuff, possibly. But what was good is that I also had 3 cameras on Shane. So I had 24 hours of Shane, a lot of the time listening to Johnny. And because we'd waited for 3 nights, all we could do is make the lighting really interesting. So the image of Shane was a very interesting one because it was very nicely lit. And I was just watching him listening to Johnny, and it didn't matter what Johnny was saying. Sometimes Shane's nodding out, falling asleep. Other times he's slowly smoking. Other times he's chuckling. But there was a kind of light in his eyes because of the lighting that you could see almost the child in this kind of old monster. There was still a child and a life and intelligence, and all the good things about Shane are still there, in a weird way. So normally you throw that stuff away. You don't have people listening to someone else as the main thing. But I suddenly realized if I put that together with all these old tapes, if I have a way, which is a simple way, you just put an old microcassette player on the table, and it's like he's listening to himself, and he's laughing when he tells 2 versions of what happened. He's not telling exactly. So it allowed me to play with the kind of narrative structure in the film in a way I hadn't done before. I hadn't seen done before, really, a guy listening to himself telling his own life story in weirdly different ways at times.
It sounds incredibly exhausting, but also kind of exciting because, as you mentioned, his eyes, because of the lighting, it sounds like that the journey of making this film.
Yeah, you wouldn't sit down and write, I'm going to take Shane listening and make him listen to something else. You wouldn't do that. But I did. What was exciting was finding the exact moment where the reaction to something Johnny said worked really well for something Shane said, and it's all about putting them in the right place.
Were there some moments of, I think this is not going to happen because it's too exhausting or too difficult?
Yeah. Oh, yeah. I really wanted to walk off a few times because, it's a big thing, English and Irish. So he was calling us Brit bastards, you Brit bastard. I'm English, but I'm sympathetic to the story of Ireland and England. It was a bad story from our point of view as English. We treated the Irish terribly, and so I resented that he couldn't see that I was sympathetic to Irish people.
Did he watch the movie on film?
Well, I didn't see it with him, but my friend, one of the producers, saw it with him, and he was in floods of tears at the end. So, but to me, he's like, "You made me miserable." Anyway, he's never going to say he liked it, but I think his wife tells me he did like it. And she was great because in the end, she got him to do that interview with her about where he's at now, which obviously you couldn't get from these old tapes and the past.
And rude question, but are you happy with the result?
I am, yeah. You always think the next one's going to be better, hopefully. But I'm happy I didn't walk off, let's put it that way.
Me too. Shane might be seen as a rude, swearing alcoholic who's singing folk songs, Irish folk songs. What makes him so special?
Well, I think he's incredibly honest in some ways and deceitful in other ways. I think he's incredibly self-sufficient. He doesn't really care what other people think, but also he's very vulnerable. You know, to me, what makes him special are these contradictions. He's English, or he's Irish. He thinks he's Irish, but he was brought up in England. You know, so there's a whole versions of Shane that are very different. And, you know, that was one good thing about having him talk with different people, because you get a different Shane each time. You know, he's one thing with the Jerry Adams guy, the IRA guy. Well, I shouldn't say that. He said he wasn't IRA. But it's another thing with Bobby Gillespie. He's very aggressive and nasty. And with Jerry, he's like a little schoolboy. And, you know, and it's just funny. I think he's got an incredible poetic talent that came from, you know, a very good education at times, reading a lot, and he's got a great mind. You know, I don't know what he's done to his body, but his mind is still intact somehow. So you can see the poet in him, and you feel that in his songs. You know, there's a poetry, there's a literary dimension that you don't get in most pop songs. Because I think he took the Irish music, but he also took the Irish creative spirit and the Irish writers who write English better than English writers. You know, so yeah, he's a fascinating man. And not a nice man at times. Other times, a really nice guy. But I saw him being really nasty. I felt I should show that in the film because that's who he is, you know.
You do sometimes. And while watching it, I was like, okay, wow, this is really... I think it was super difficult to find a balance between showing his bad sides and the good sides. And I mean, I want to quote him, 3 bottles of whiskey per day and I'm still alive. Like, he drinks a lot. And I mean, a lot. So either he's holding alcohol in his hand or a microphone or cigarette or everything at the same time.
I think he gave up the guitar so he could hold a cigarette and a glass, you know.
It's incredible that this person is still alive.
Yeah. Well, it's weird watching him now because he drinks all day, you know, but it's very slow and it's a little sip. It's not like he used to. I think it's just topping up, keeping the right level of alcohol in there to keep going. It's strange, but it's fascinating. I think the film hopefully shows the dangers of taking too many drugs or drink or whatever, but also shows the liberating effect that it had on him and his work. Some people it's good for. You know, it depends how you take them, you know. I think I'm not anti-drugs, I'm anti-people getting too lost, you know, so they can't control it, you know. But certainly, you know, I've been interested in other poets from other periods who've taken alcohol or drank a lot. Many great writers, for some reason, seem to like a drink, you know. So I hope it's not too judgmental, but hopefully it does show the dangers of it. And
yeah, it does. I mean, I can only tell from myself because I don't drink at all, so I have another perspective on drinking and stuff. I don't judge, but I was really wondering, wow, I mean, how difficult was it to find the balance and also to deal with it in a respectful way, because you don't want him to feel like he's an alcoholic, although he probably knows that he is. Yeah.
Well, he says, I'm not an alcoholic, doesn't he, in the film? But
yeah, he said, I might be an alcoholic. As you say, he contradicts himself a couple times. Yeah.
Well, it was difficult to find the balance, but that's the, you know, really what editing is about, is putting things in the right sequence. And they become very powerful if they are in the right sequence. If they're in the wrong sequence, they lose their power. So it's about how you organize a film and edit the images and the sounds in relation to each other, and that's how you create a a kind of balance. It's the timing of when you hit one way of looking at it and then you hit another way.
Did you listen to the Pogues?
I did, yeah. I went to see them more at the beginning than later on. I did kind of lose touch with them a bit. But yeah, no, it's very exciting. Early Pogues gigs were great because it was kind of a long time, 8 years or so after punk. And when punk, they got it back in the box, you know, finally. Get this monster back in the box. And then you had the new romantic thing and everyone, you know, we lost that edge of punk for a long time. So when Shane came back with the Pogues, it had a very punky feel as well as the Irish feel. And yeah, I remember being like, wow, it's great to see a band with that kind of attitude again, you know.
So music plays a huge role in your life and your career, obviously.
Yep, silence does too, though. I like nothing, no noise when I go to sleep.
Oh, really?
Well, I think silence is a big thing in films, you know, as well as music or other sounds. But yeah, music is a big thing for me because I was born at a time and a place in London in the mid-'60s. I was a school kid and, you know, we had so many great bands then doing it really for the first time. You know, the Stones were from London, the Kinks were my favourite, the Who, Small Faces, Yardbirds. And every week you had a new song, a new single, and you felt they were talking to you because you were the London young kids that they were hoping you'd buy their records. And of course they then became famous everywhere. But at the beginning you had this you imagined you had this close relationship with these bands because they were really talking to what you were feeling. And, you know, you had this sense that what you were learning at school, you could learn much better through the music or from your parents. You know, the music was telling you a kind of truth about things that you weren't getting elsewhere. So it became you know, I saw the world through music. Initially, when I was a kid, I didn't see any films. My parents didn't have a TV, and so, you know, I learnt about everything through music, secretly listening at a little, you know, we had the crystal radio under the sheets. When they didn't know that I was listening to all this music, but I was.
Do you remember which band kind of led you to?
The Kinks, definitely the Kinks. I heard that song, You Really Got Me, you know, the famous da-da-da-da, on this little ear set. Like, I mean, it must be really tinny, terrible sound, but to me it sounded like, you know, some kind of dirty nuclear bomb had been put in the pillow or something. And hear this thing and like, wow, how can it sound so exciting? You know, it's amazing. And then I realized they were London. Then I realized they lived the other side of Hampstead Heath from where I went to school. So we used to get out of the classroom, we call it bunking off, running away from school to watch the Kinks drink because they would sit outside a pub. And we could see the Kinks, you know, it was fantastic.
And you never thought of creating an own band or making music? I
did have a band when I was at school called the Bombers, which was kind of a punk name before punk, actually, because IRA were bombing London at the time, and we called ourselves the Bombers. But I played the saxophone really badly, and I thought I could be John Coltrane, but I couldn't, so I gave up.
Took the camera instead.
Something else, yeah.
Your career is quite impressive, and what I like the most is that you also failed and stood up again. I mean, you made decisions that are brave. When you Google yourself, you might read it. There's something written like you were made responsible for
destroying the British film industry.
Not really.
No, I wish well, they said that with Absolute Beginners, this film that I made, and
then you just disappeared to the US.
Well, I couldn't work in England after that. You know, this was delinquent anarchist filmmaker who destroyed the British film industry. And I wish I had, but I can't claim that, I don't think. But they thought that was a good way of getting rid of me, I think. So I had to go to America.
How did it feel back then? I mean, now you're smiling, but...
Felt terrible because I knew I was responsible for it as well, because it's a funny film because it was hyped. So to get it made, we were very young and they didn't like young people at that time making films. So we had to hype it. We had to say, look, we've got this article about it in the Face. We've got this article about it in the NME, the music papers, the Guardian, you know, trying to get a buzz going about the project, and it became bigger and bigger, and we made a big mistake to build it up. So before it came out, everyone was bored with this thing. There were like cartoons about it in all the national newspapers, and we were one of 3 big films from this studio that was supposed to save the British film industry. All 3 of them bombed, you know, like. So it's like, it's over, the film industry is over. But they were bigger, much bigger budgets than ours. Because we were the young kids, we got the spanking, you know, and it was horrible because they were really vicious about it. You're never going to work again and all this stuff. So it was, you know, it would have been easy to say, well, that didn't work, I'll try something else. But I was so into making films, I thought, well, I'm not going to give up, you know, I'll go to America and see what happens.
Let's go to America and fuck it up there.
Yeah.
But luckily, it went pretty great. But what did you learn from, like, looking back at your career? What did you learn?
Well, don't overhype a film before you've made it or come out. That's a bad idea. I don't know. I've learned that you know, to me anyway, if it's not your personal truth that you're trying to find or express, then you don't have it takes a lot of stamina and a lot of energy and commitment to make a film. And if you don't have that fuel of it being very personal, I think it's hard to do it, you know. I mean, I was aware in Hollywood you could become a Hollywood director, but you're giving up your personal truth. You're working in a big system that doesn't care about what you think. They just want you to tell the story in a certain way so it makes lots of money. So I learned that wasn't really, well, I wasn't the right person to be there for them on that scale, you know.
To all the people watching your film, what do you want them to take away from it?
Older people.
All the people.
All the people.
Maybe also older people.
What do I want them to take away from it? Well, I think, you know, it's a celebration of a wonderful human being and what's possible for a human being to achieve, especially when he creates all these kind of disaster scenarios for himself, but still manages through them to find, maybe because of them, to find truths that other people can't find. I don't know. I mean, his songs are very powerful because they very much represent who he is, you know, that he's not writing a love song to order or, you know, he's ripping bits of himself out and of his life. And so I hope it's about creativity and the potential to be creative. And I was pleased that I could make a film that touched on Ireland and England, and because in England we're not told about that history at school and a lot of kids don't know about it. And I think, you know, understanding your past, even the recent past, is important because more and more we're losing that. Even kids today don't really know about 20 years ago, you know. And I think you can't really be in charge of the future unless you know about where you come from and your culture comes from and the tensions that create it. And then you have a chance of, you know, I'm more concerned about the young people seeing the films because I want them to learn from where they come from to have a weapon that they can use in the future. Because I think we're running out of time. You know, we're not just cooking the planet and all that. We are in the process of extincting ourselves as a species, you know, so the phone in your hand is metaphorically becoming the brain in your head kind of thing. And unless we're careful, we're going to wake up one day and like, what happened? We used to be human beings. Now we're half computer, half, and we don't think for ourselves anymore. It's like, I think we're on that course, which is probably even more frightening than the world burning up and flooding and all the climate or pandemic or all the nightmares that are going on right now. I think the worst one is what we're doing to ourselves in a way, and it's only young people who can change that, stop that, and anything they can have as a kind of aid, a weapon in their attempt to stay human. That's what I would advise. Don't give it up.
Stay human. Shane was metaphorically looking for his crock of gold his entire life. In the end, he was looking for happiness.
Yeah.
What's your crock of gold?
Well, I guess it is happiness, but happiness is a fleeting thing, isn't it? It's like a passing cloud, and it wouldn't be happy unless you had the unhappy. So I don't think you can look for happiness and think you can hold on to it. I mean, I'm invested as a creative person, so I hope I can be creative, express who I feel through my work to other people is a big part of who I am, but I'm also a father. I have kids that mean a huge amount to me. But I wouldn't say it's happiness. It's just, I think it's being aware of everything in the moment you're in is a great goal. It's very hard to achieve that, but that's being really alive. I'd rather be alive than be happy.